The Finance and Investment Cell of Shriram College of Commerce welcomes you to today's session of Shriram Financial Forum. We are honored to have amongst us our guest of honor, Mr. Anil Chopra. Welcome, sir. Mr. Anil Chopra is a director in Bajaj Capital Group of Companies, a leading player in the financial planning and investment strategy business. He joined Bajaj Capital Limited in 1984 and has been an instrumental part in expanding the network of Bajaj Capital Limited from 6 to 235 offices and from 60 to 3,000 highly talented human resources during his tenure as a Chief Executive Officer till 2017. His interest in financial planning is intense and profound. In fact, he is the first ever person from the Indian financial services industry to enter the office of FPSB in Denver, Colorado, USA in November 1999 with a dream to bring the concept and profession of financial planning in India. He took keen interest in organizing the first ever association of like-minded companies in India to form a body which later converted and rechristened as FPSB India. A chartered accountant by profession, Mr. Chopra has been widely quoted in multiple financial and general medias on key financial developments in the industry. He is also a certified financial planner. Sir has achieved so much that this list of accolades never ends. Now, I would like to invite our faculty advisor of FIC, Ms. Saroj Joshi, to welcome everyone.
Good morning, all. I, Saroj Joshi, on behalf of Finance and Investment Cell SRCC, welcome you all to this session on the topic financial planning, wealth creation, and behavioral issues in investing. It is giving me immense pleasure to have Mr. Anil Chopra, Director, Bajaj Capital Limited with us. And I think there could have been no other person better than you to talk about this topic, sir. We are really honored to have you with us. Now, I think everyone is eagerly waiting to listen to you. So I request you to kindly take over the session and enlighten us. Welcome, sir, and thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Joshi, and thank you, Vidya, for that kind words and wonderful introduction. And good morning to all of you, friends. We have 1 hour with us, and I must begin, with a confession. Is that when we were asked to be ready for a presentation and we were asked to choose a topic, in fact, we gave 3 topics: financial planning, wealth creation strategies, and behavioral issues in investing. And somehow probably the commas were missing between the 3, so all 3 got clubbed. So that is how the topic today is a very vast one, and actually speaking, each one of them is a separate topic in itself for hour and a half. But now I think, keeping the time limit in our mind, we would touch upon each thing, but we would mostly spend upon the behavioral issues in investing, which I'm sure would be a topic of a lot of interest to the students who have joined here today. And if whenever there is another session and if a request comes, we would love to talk in detail about financial planning and also about wealth creation strategies. So I just wanted to begin with this note so that we are all very clear, because otherwise it's very difficult to cover these 3 vast topics in just under 55 minutes. Now, because of this Zoom environment, we have to interact through chat only. And I would expect all students to be very, very participative and give responses to whatever we are discussing, so that we go back with some takeaways and the entire hour becomes much more fruitful and productive. So can I get some affirmations? We are all ready to get into the journey of behavioral issues in investing. Let me get some.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Okay, so now when it comes to investing, obviously, all of us know that whenever anyone invests in this world, my question would have been that why do people invest? What is it that they are expecting? So obviously, you would have given a lot of answers, and the answers would have been correct. But the perfect answer is that people are expecting returns, right? So that is the obvious answer, that whenever we invest, we are expecting returns. But what are the various factors which affect the returns from investments? So answers could be, a growing economy, fundamentals of corporate world, government policies, interest rates, inflation, in the economy, whether the inflation is under control or not, and so on and so forth. There are so many factors which affect the returns from our investment. And mostly they also depend upon the global developments, and obviously events like this pandemic that we are going through. These events also affect the investments, but mostly generally the points which come to our mind are that a growing economy, if the GDP is growing at a robust pace, then we can expect good decent returns from our investments. And also when the fundamentals are strong, when the government policies are very conducive for the business, and when the tax laws are very friendly, and also when the infrastructure is there for industries and for entrepreneurs to grow, and when the interest rates are lower, when the inflation is under control, all these factors contribute a lot to generating returns from our investments, which is our main objective when we invest. So what we have discussed so far is that why we invest, because we are expecting returns. And returns, they come from where? They come from a variety of reasons which I mentioned. But I wanted to tell you, friends, that all these reasons are good answers. All of them are good answers, but none of them is a correct answer. So that is, where the interest generates. So all these points which I just mentioned, and I'm sure had the chat been open, you would have given similar answers which I just mentioned, that GDP growth, low inflation, low interest rates, government policies, fiscal deficit under control, all these plus export-led economy, consumption-led economy, demography of our country, all these factors, they contribute to generating returns. But all these are good answers, but the correct answer is missing. The correct answer is how people get returns from investment. The most important factor is their behavior. The behavior, the correct behavior, the rational behavior is the only strategy which an investor can make returns from the markets. Why a lot of investors fail to get desired returns from the market is because of their erratic behavior, is because of their faulty behavior, is because they are not able to control their emotions. So this is an important point on which a lot of research has been done. And I'm sure you would be knowing that a few years ago, Nobel Prizes were also given to two economists who came up with this idea of behavioral issues in investing, and why when markets are giving returns, but investors are not actually getting it. And the main reason contributing to that is behavior. Now, developing it further from here is that now if supposing you invest 10,000 rupees and within 1 month, 10,000 grows to 12,000 rupees. So what is the kind of emotion that you will get? Had I asked you this question and you had chat open, you would have answered, well, we would feel happy. We would feel elated. We would feel full of joy. It would give us confidence that we invested 10,000 rupees and it has become 12,000 rupees. Primarily, most of the answers would have been that we would feel happy. And that's the correct answer. Yes, when we invest and our investments amount grow, then we feel a sense of joy, a sense of success in our brain. Similarly, if you invest 10,000 rupees and it becomes 8,000 rupees, say after 1 month or after 3 months, then what kind of emotions you will experience? You will definitely experience sadness. You will experience pain of losing money. So these are the normal reactions to the gains and the losses when it comes to investments. But here my question is that when you invest 10,000 rupees and it grows to 12,000 rupees, and obviously you become happy. But if I ask you, you become how much happy? This much, or 1 kilo happy, or 5 gram happy? There is no measurement. There is no measurement of how happy you become when your investments grow significantly, say 20%. Similarly, when it comes to losing money and you suffer, you experience a pain, you experience some agony that your hard-earned money, you invested 10,000, it has only become 8,000. Then you experience pain and you experience, some difficulty, and you start thinking that where I have gone wrong. So again, if the question is that how much pain you experience, again, there is no quantification of that. We can't express it in any measurement that I suffered that much pain or I'm feeling that much, sorry about it. But the scientists, they went ahead and did some research on the cells in the brain as to how different individuals react to gains and losses. And they found very interesting results, which I would like to share, and it has been scientifically proven. The result is that the intensity of losing 2,000 rupees is double than the intensity of gaining 2,000 rupees. This is scientifically proven, which means that we get happy when we make money, but if we lose similar amount of money, then the pain is double than that of the gain that we make. So if we were able to measure it, so this is the way human psychology works, that when we lose money, we feel more sad as compared to when we make money and we feel happy about it. So intensity is exactly the double. The way brain cells react to happiness and to pain, the pain is double. So this is something as students of finance and going forward, building your career and dealing with clients and their money, either as a fund manager or as a financial planner or as the investment consultant, if that is going to be the area of your operation, you must always remember that when you deal with investors, either in your own individual capacity or when you're advising to your clients, then always remember that when they lose money, they react more sharply. Their pain is double rather than when they make money. And this is also a behavioral issue which has been proven again and again, that when people make money from investments, they give credit to themselves as if they are very smart. They knew it, they have done the studies. And when they lose money, they give credit to the advisor or to the market or to the government or to the economy. So this is another behavioral issue in investing, that on an average, generally, when people actually make money, they think that they are intelligent, they have studied the markets, they understand the fundamentals, and it is their decision which has actually helped them to make money. But actually when they lose money, then they never discredit themselves. They find reasons in economy, in pandemic, in government, or in the advisor from whom they took advice, etc., etc. So these are some of the common behavioral issues in investing, right? So just to recap what we have discussed so far is that we invest for getting returns. That is the only objective. And returns are not governed by, mainly they are not governed by the government policies or the inflation or the fiscal deficit or the fundamentals. Returns are in 80% cases a result of the behavior which the investors display in the market. And we'll come in some more details there. And also we discussed that it has been proven that the intensity of pain in losing money is exactly double than the intensity of joy when we make money. And we have to always remember it when dealing with our clients, when dealing with our own emotions. Now, taking it forward, what are the two most popular and common emotions which affect our investment decisions? And I'm again repeating that I'm missing, the interaction part. I'm missing the chats and the answers, because that would have made it much more interesting. But we understand that it's not possible due to whatever reasons. Now, if I were to ask you, what are the two most important behavioral issues which affect the investment decisions? The two most important emotions, and what are the answers? Obviously, you can't give your answers because the chat is disabled, but I'll tell you now that you might give several answers, but the correct answers are greed and fear. Greed and fear. These are the two most important behavioral issues which actually direct our action when it comes to investing or exiting from the market. So most of us are controlled by these two emotions, and then we end up making mistakes. And I have been telling you from the very beginning that markets give us returns, but we don't get it. Just imagine that if I give you 100 rupees, obviously you have received 100 rupees. It's very simple. That X gives 100 rupees to Y, so Y has received 100 rupees. Similarly, if I give you a pen, you receive a pen. So it's very simple. But when it comes to returns from the markets, that does not come true. Markets give returns, but investors do not get it. You know, if markets have given, say, 16% annualized returns in last 10 years, investors have not got it. Not all, few investors have got it, maybe 10%, 15%, 20%, but 80% investors have not got those returns. And what is the reason? There is only one reason, which is behavior. So behavior in investing is the number one factor which would ultimately decide whether investors will make money or not. And within behavior also, the two important aspects that we need to control are greed and fear. Greed and fear. So here, if my colleague is there, then I can request him to share the screen. The first slide, please, if you are listening to me, and if you can put it up. The first slide only. Right.
Yes.
Now this slide, if you look at it carefully, it will explain to you the behavioral issues in investing. If you see here, I have plotted, you know, a particular stock. You can call it a stock or a Sensex or anything. And over a period of 1 year. So we see on x-axis, we see April, June, September, December, and March, which means that we have plotted the prices of a particular stock or a particular economy or a particular Sensex over a 12 months period. So April, it was 20,000. June, it rose to 25,000. September, it rose to 35,000. December, it fell to 26,000. March, it went up to 36,000. So these are normal trajectories. If you will see the graphs of shares, stocks, indices, Sensex, Nifty, you pick up any share or industry in the world, this is how normally the graphs would look like. You know, they go up and down. There is a general volatility for various reasons. For certain periods they go up and for certain periods they go down. Now, if you were to look at this particular, let's call it company X, you know, or maybe a mutual fund scheme X. So here you will see that in April, the price was 20,000 rupees. And in March, the price was 36,000 rupees. So if the chat was open, I would have asked you how much return it works out to. How much return it works out to in 1 year, because the price has gone up from 20,000 in March to 36,000, 20,000 in April to 36,000 in March. So obviously, many of you would have given quick answers that, sir, this is 80% return, very, very robust, because 20,000 has become 36,000. So 16,000 profit on investment of 20,000, which is 80% return, which is obviously, this is an example, so we have to just understand it. 80% return obviously otherwise is very, very good and generally, you know, not available on a regular basis. But let us try and understand this example. And this is a true example. This is a true story which I am sharing. So now you can see that this stock or this economy or this mutual fund scheme has given 80% return. But when the survey was done to know from the investors in this particular scheme, then it was found that 95% of them lost money. Now this is something amazing. This is something not to believe, that how come a share which has risen from 20,000 to 36,000 in a span of 12 months, generating 80% return, how come 95% of the investors in this stock, they lost money? And now, by now, you would know the reason, because that is the topic of the day. They lost money because of the behavior, because of the wrong decisions, because of the greed and fear. Now, if we see the second slide, the answers would be easy. So, Pankaj, if you can plot the second slide, please. See, so price went up from 20,000 to 36,000, but 95% of the investors entered into this stock in the months of August and September, when the prices were continuously rising from 20 to 25 to 26, 27, 28, it was galloping, it was jumping. Then suddenly, you know, the greed factor comes in, the herd mentality comes in, media coverage, television channels, they all talk about, oh, look at this script, this is the script of the future. So it's galloping. So 90% or 95% of the investors, they entered into this script or this scheme or this economy in the months of August and September. And for some reason, then obviously volatility happened. it started coming down, sliding down from 35,000 to 34, 33, 32, 31, 30 people, you know, start getting panicky. Then what happens? Then the fear factor, you know, kind of attacks them, that they might lose their money. You know, how long should they wait? So 95% investors entered in August, September, and most of them, almost 90-95% of them, they exited in November and December. And that is how, whereas this overall stock gave 80% return over a period of 12 months from 20,000 to 36,000, but still when the exact survey was done, it was found that almost 90-95% of the investors in this particular share, they have lost money because they entered in August and September when the prices were rising, and they entered because of the greed factor, and they exited when the prices started sliding in the months of November and December, and that is how they booked a loss. And they kept on cursing the market, the economy, the advisors, the TV channels, etc., because they don't ever generally admit their own faults. This is another interesting part of human psychology, that when we make profits, we like to consider ourselves as smart people, but when we lose money, then we look for reasons here and there. So this was a simple story to explain to you that how greed and fear work. Now, my next question is that between this greed and fear, which emotion is more intense? Again, I'm missing the chat here because I would have got some interesting answers. Now, I'll have to reveal it myself, that which emotion between greed and fear is more intense? Or you think they are same? Greed also impacts us as much as the fear impacts us. Again, the answer is very interesting. They are not same in intensity. Just like, if you remember, I told you that the happiness of gain is less than the sadness of pain, and almost double. Similarly, when it comes to greed and fear, between these two factors also, greed is more intense than fear. So we are more gripped by greed than we are gripped by fear. This also has been proven again and again, you know, through scientific empirical research. And I would like to, you know, share a small story here. You might find it interesting. It's like for small children, but that would drive the message. The story goes like this, that, you know, in a kingdom, there were a lot of, you know, pickpocketing was happening. And the king was, of course, very, very angry about it, that there's no discipline, you know, in his territory, and a lot of pickpocketing is happening. So he wanted to teach them a lesson. So he said that if anybody is caught pickpocketing, then he will be stoned to death on the choke, where people can come and watch it. So obviously, what he was trying to do, he was trying to use the fear factor. That he thought that by making this announcement, that if anybody is caught pickpocketing by his police, then such persons would be stoned to death by the general public in a choke. So his idea, and such practices are even still, you know, are practiced in few countries, but let's not go there. So he announced that. And what happened, that after 3-4 months, 2 pickpockets were actually caught still. And so they were brought to the choke. A lot of public got accumulated there, you know, few thousands of people to see, you know, how these people will be stoned to death. And they were actually stoned to death. And after the public dispersed, they found that out of those 1,000 people, 10 people's pockets had been picked. Even when some of these people were being disciplined, or not disciplined, rather being punished by stoning to death. So that just proves the point that greed is even bigger than fear. So friends, greed and fear are 2 emotions with which we live, and we have to control them. And if we become advisors ourselves, if we become consultants ourselves, then we have to always remember that our clients would be grappling with these emotions. They would be impacted by these emotions, and we have to help them navigate through these emotions. And of course, before we help them do it, we have to first control our own emotions when it comes to investing, you know, in markets. Now, I will ask you, you know, another simple analogy is that how we take our investment decisions and how behavior impacts it. So let us say that you invest 10,000 rupees in stock A and 10,000 rupees in stock B. And stock A increases from 10,000 rupees to 12,000 rupees, and stock B goes down from 10,000 rupees to 8,000 rupees, say within 3 months. So now you invested 20,000 rupees, 10,000 in A, 10,000 in B. You still have 20,000 rupees, 10,000 has become 12,000, stock A, stock B has become 8,000. Now, supposing you need 5,000 rupees for anything, you need it. So from which stock will you exit? From stock A or from stock B? Again, I'm missing the chat because I would have loved to see your answers to this question. Because many of you would have given stock A with the reasons, many of you would have said stock B with reasons, and many of you would have given other interesting answers also, like maybe 50% from stock A, 50% from stock B. But these are just my assumptions. Maybe some of you are very, very smart and you also give the exact answer which is there in our mind and which I will reveal now. But generally, I have done these sessions several times over in the last few years, and some people say that, sir, we must do profit booking. So let us sell the 10,000 which have become 12,000, let us sell 5,000 rupees from there because we already made profit here, and let's book the profits. Some people will say, no, the one which is incurring loss, we should sell that because that might further, go down. And the one which is making profit, we should not touch it because it will make more profits. So these are two different thinking. The third thinking is, some people say, sir, let's sell 2,500 stock A, 2,500 stock B. Let's not take the middle path, So these are the general answers which I get when I ask this specific question that you need 5,000 rupees, which stock you should exit and in what proportion. But friends, all these answers, if they are also coming to your mind, same answers, then they are all good answers. I'm not here to judge your thinking, but they are not correct answers. The correct answer is we need not look into their past performance. This is irrelevant. That which one has grown from 10 to 12, which one has gone down from 10 to 8. We have to see the future outlook. Now, just to make it very simple, let us say these 10,000 which has become 12,000. Let us say that is an airline company. If that is an airline company, now the pandemic has happened, we know that that stock is not going to do well, at least for 1 year or two. The prospects are not so good for travel, etc. People will not be traveling. And supposing the second stock is say, a company which is making surgical equipment, so say surgical masks. So we know that surgical masks are in huge demand now, and that company will do better. Although in the previous period, for whatever reasons, its share price might have come down. So whenever we have to take a decision about from which company to exit or which company to buy, the past, whatever has happened, has very minimal role. Most important thing is we need to look at the future prospects. That if we feel that the company B, which is into surgical masks and they have got huge orders and they will make huge profits, so let's not exit from there because then we are missing the opportunity. On the other hand, the first company, maybe that they made profit because the conditions were normal, but now the pandemic has come and now probably, for next 1, 2, 3 years, the airline companies will not be doing as much business. So we can exit from there. So this is the correct decision-taking process, which generally, we miss when we make the decisions. We look at, the past performance. We look at which company has done better, which company has lost. Where we are lost, sometimes, we do not want to book it because when we book the loss, then it becomes actual loss. So these are all the emotional biases which come into our decision-making process, which we need to avoid. So again, so far we have discussed, the simple investors' biases which come, while taking decisions. Now, I'll talk about, general how money matters affect, our thinking and our even ethics also. If somebody of us gets a lot of money, suddenly, so what we call the sudden money impact, say lottery or whatever, or somebody passes away and we get inheritance. So when somebody gets a lot of money suddenly, then what do we feel that how his behavior will change? Will he become a more humble person or a more kind person, or he'll become, much more spendthrift, or he would, start getting into vices? Or so what kind of behavioral changes can come to a person when somebody gets sudden money? This is another area of interest to researchers and to psychologists all over. And here again, I would have loved if the chat was open to take your views on this topic also. But now I will share, whatever are the correct views so that, the message is driven home. Now, again, I would like to share, one small story, and I would again miss the question and answers, but I will ask the question, but I'll give the answer also myself. It goes like this, that it's a true story, right? It's a true event. So there was a crash, where the daycare center, where the young working couples, they leave their small children because they don't have anybody to look after them. And, in the nuclear families, and both husband and wife are working. So they both go to their own offices in the morning. They drop their child or children, in these daycare centers, so crash. And then in the evening, on the way back, either the father or the mother would collect the children and take them home. So this is a general practice which is there in all the advanced countries, and also it is catching up even in India also, even in Delhi, Noida, Gurgaon, Pune, Bangalore, and so many cities. The need for these daycare centers or for creches, etc., is going up now. Okay, so now a young couple was into this business of running a daycare center, and they were making good money because there is a growing need. A lot of young couples, they have small children, both of them are working, and they have to leave their children, and they would pay good amounts so that their children are taken care of, during the 8 to 9 hours when they are in their office. But this young couple who was running this daycare center was experiencing that if the timings were say 9 to 7, that you come anytime after 9 in the morning and leave your child and collect your child before 7 in the evening, then the charges for 1 month are X amount or whatever. But they found that generally the parents were coming late to collect their children. They'll come at 7:20, 7:30, even 8. Sometimes, if there are 10 children, even if one child is remaining and his or her parent has not come to pick, they cannot go home. I'm sure you understand this because they have the responsibility. So sometimes somebody will come at 8:30, 9. Oh, sorry. I got stuck in a meeting. I got, stuck in traffic. I'm very sorry. You had to wait for me. So, but they didn't know, what to do. So they were suffering that every day some of the other parent would get late and they won't be able to reach their home. So they were thinking how to tackle this problem. Then they decided that, okay, we will start charging for this extra time. So they said that, okay, till 7 is fine. 7 to 8, 1 hour, $20 extra. And beyond 8, $50 extra. So some such, prices they fixed for people, those who are coming late to collect their children. And now the question is that if earlier 40% parents were coming late on an average, 30 minutes, 40 minutes late, now after they initiated this new mechanism of collecting extra amounts for coming late, then what do you think would be, what percentage of people now would still come late or not come late, or will it become zero? That is my question. And obviously you can't give the answers because the chat is disabled. But I'm sure we would have got very, very interesting answers, ranging from it might become zero now. People don't like to, pay money. They like to save money, or maybe 10% or 20%, etc., or maybe other different answers also. But now let me tell you exactly what happened. That problem actually got worsened instead of getting solved. So instead of 40% people coming late, after they introduced this extra money for late hours, the percentage went up to 60, 70, 80%. And they also found that people were not feeling guilty now. When they would come late, they are saying, okay, you take the money. What's the problem? I was busy in a meeting. I went out for some early dinner or something. So after that, even the guilt went away, and they even stopped saying sorry to that couple because they were paying money for it. And when they were paying money, then more people started coming late as compared to earlier. So this is how the money affects the behavior. Sometimes it corrupts, our thinking process. So the human psychology is, brain works like that, that, money, actually, many of us would feel that people would know that these guys want to go home early, like most of us. And this is just a way of putting the message that please don't come late. But the message is not taken that way once the money matter comes in. Had they requested simply without saying any extra money, probably that would have worked better. But because they tried to bring money into it, the behavior changed. So this was, one example of sharing that how money matters, corrupt our thinking or affects our way of thinking. The second story, which again is similar in nature, but again proves the same point, is that of a village in Switzerland, where if I'm sure some of you, many of you would have visited this beautiful country with your parents, etc. So there, some experiments were being done, relating some atomic experiments, and I'm sure all of you know that Switzerland is very advanced in terms of, some great experiments have been done in the villages in Switzerland, particularly through the tunnels and all. So, but there the rule is that if any atomic experiment has to be done on the periphery of the village, then the local population's consent has to be taken. Without the consent of the local population, the government cannot conduct, any atomic experiment, on the borders of that village, because there, although they take complete precautions, but still there is a slight possibility, of anything leaking or mishap, etc. So it's part of the rules of the government that they have to take permission from at least 75% of the public adults living in that village. Unless 75% give the permission, government cannot conduct the investigation. So because they wanted to conduct a very important investigation, which was very important for not only for Switzerland, for the rest of the world. So the mayor, he started a poll, and he said that it's a matter of pride for us that, that our village has been selected for this experiment, and so please do your voting. And now the voting was done, but when the results came out, the results were only 62%. So only 62% said yes, and 38% said no, that this is not our village. This is not conducive. Maybe that we might suffer, etc., etc. So the permission was not granted. So now the mayor was in two minds what to do, because this experiment is very, very crucial for the government, for the state, and also for the world. So then he thought of another idea, going for second time, and he said that now we will give 50 Swiss franc to everybody, who agrees and who gives a yes vote. 50 Swiss franc. So he thought that now more people would be enthused, because people, like to be incentivized for doing small things. So he was very confident that his decision is correct. And again, by now you would have guessed that what became the answer. When I ask this question, some people say now 100% people would say yes, because they are getting 50 franc, but that's not the case. Actually, the numbers fell. The numbers fell from 62% to below 50%, because suddenly when the money was introduced, then the villagers or the people living there, their thinking changed, and they said, "Oh, you want to buy, our self-security with money? It's not done. We will not sign on this paper just because you are giving us 50 francs. It's a matter of our own pride." So this is how, the money matters completely change the way we think, and instead of thinking rationally, we start, taking decisions based upon certain emotions. So again, when it comes to investing, behavioral issues in investing, the common analogy that we give is that when the markets have fallen, for example, now currently markets were earlier 40,000, 42,000, then they fell to 30,000, 34,000. Sensex currently it is 30. So everyone is saying that the markets have crashed due to pandemic, and these are not the good times, etc. So people are shying away from the markets. But now if we look at it the way normally we behave in general circumstances. So for example, if you go to a mall now, I'm sure all the Delhi boys and girls know that today the malls have also opened, after a long gap. So you can get back to malls wearing masks, etc., and maintaining social distancing. But coming back to the example, when you go to a mall and you see a shirt, right in the front of your eyes as you enter, some shop, and you like the shirt a lot, or girls like the top a lot, and the first thing that comes to our mind is to go and check the price tag. That is the human tendency. That the first thing we like to know, what is the price tag? And we look at the price tag and it says 2,000 rupees, and you think in your mind and you say, it's a good shirt, it's a good top, 2,000 rupees, maybe a little extra, not worth it. So you come back. Okay, this is very common, that we look at so many price tags and we don't buy it because we feel that either the price is high or maybe we don't need it now. And you go back to the same mall maybe 2 weeks later, and then you see 30% discount. That same shirt is now for 1,400 rupees, and you have loved that shirt. You remember the last time you went and you really liked it and you were looking at it. Now what will you do? You would certainly buy it because you will feel that you may not get this chance again. Same shirt, exactly same print, same color, same pattern. It was for 2,000 rupees, now for 1,400 rupees. So what will happen is, not one, you might probably buy two, of maybe different colors or so, because you want to stock it. So this is a perfectly rational behavior. This is how human people must actually take their decisions. But when it comes to investing in stock market or equity markets, the same rational behavior is missing. So people actually buy when the prices are going up, up, up and up. Like I showed you the example, of that on the graph, that all of them went to the market in the months of August and September. And when the prices are falling, that is the time to buy. Like you buy your shirt because it has become cheaper, but you start selling it then. So these are again the simple instances of our human minds not acting rationally when it comes to taking investment decisions, whereas generally we act very rationally. The other simple example is that supposing you want to, your mother asks you to go beta buy 2 kgs of apple from the nearby market. So you go to the market and you ask some apples and he says 200 rupees a kilo. So you want to buy 2 kgs, right? Suddenly your friend tells you, who is next with you, he says, look dear, the next market, just the adjoining market, this morning only, I bought 150 rupees. So you might think, oh, 150 is same. He said, yeah, absolutely same, maybe better than this, same, absolutely same quality. So then you will think, okay, so I'm saving 100 rupees. So quickly you will say, Chika bhaiya rehne do. You will go to the next market. You will see, same apples for 150 rupees a kilo. You will buy 2 kilos and you will feel very good about it, that you saved 100 rupees, and you will come back and you will tell your mom also about it. But supposing now, similar example, that you are planning to, buy maybe, Apple iPhone or some expensive item. So you go to the mall and you're looking at it and say it is 70,800 rupees. And suddenly your friend tells, oh, in the next market, I think it is 70,200 rupees. You will think, yeah, 500-600 rupees ke liye kya ja raha hai wahan pe? So when it comes to, although it is the same thing, that you have to walk 100 yards and you will save 500 rupees. But because you are buying something worth 70,000 rupees, so your mind starts working, thinking in terms of, percentage and not absolute. Whereas while buying apples, you walked that 50 yards to save 100 rupees. But now when you're buying an expensive item and you are saving 500 rupees, you will probably not walk. Some of you will walk, but 80% of us will not walk that 50 yards because we think in terms of percentages. यार क्या 72,000 रुपए की चीज ले रहे हैं, 300 रुपए के लिए हम छोड़ के दूसरी मार्केट में जाएंगे? What's the point? So this is again another way of irrational behavior when it comes to taking, money matters decisions, etc. So at this point, I would like to take a break and I would like to get some sense as to whatever we are discussing. Are we all, on it? Are we all finding it interesting? And if there are any comments or any suggestions, if we can't do it through chat, then maybe we can do it through audio. Or if you would like me to cover a little bit about financial planning or wealth creation strategies, we can do that also.
So anything will do. Either we can go ahead with the questions or you can continue with the session, any which ways.
Right, but I would still like to get some comments from. Are they all muted, or they are unmuted also?
They're currently muted, sir. I'll just get back to you. Just one minute.
No, for sure. And if are there any questions which have come to you? Because how would
Yeah,
I get questions?
sir, we do have questions. Do I ask them? Because we sent across registration forms and people had entered their questions over there.
Right, sure. So because I think we are already at 19 past 12, so we have only 11 minutes to go. So I think it's important that we cover a few questions also. But obviously, I can definitely talk about some thumb rules when it comes to financial planning and wealth creation strategies. Obviously, they require a full session of 1 to 1.5 hours to 2 hours. But just to share with you some of the thumb rules which youngsters can keep in their mind and then they can actually elaborate upon them is the first rule is that every working person must save minimum 30% of the monthly earning or remuneration for short-term and mid-term and long-term goals and investing. So if you are earning 1 lakh of rupees, you must save 30,000 rupees. If you are earning 5 lakhs of rupees, you must save 1,50,000. This is the bare minimum amount which everyone should be ensuring to save and invest out of the monthly earnings, so that all your goals which come during your lifetime are considerably comfortably achieved. That is the first thumb rule. That is minimum. Higher it is, better it is. What are the common goals that come our way? The common goals are self-marriage, which obviously in our Indian conditions, it is taken care of by our parents. So generally, we don't have to financially save for our own marriages in most of the cases because our parents take care of it. But in Western society, self-marriage is also an important goal. Then the next big goal which comes is the higher education expenses of the children, which is a big financial outgo. And then the next is children's marriage, then retirement planning, buying a car, buying a house, buying a bigger car, buying a bigger house, and then globe-trotting, traveling around the world, and leading a comfortable lifestyle after retirement. These are some of the 5-7 common goals which the overall world in every country, whenever the questions are asked, these are the answers which people get. Now, in order to ensure that all these goals are met as part of your financial planning, one needs to follow some wealth creation strategies. And the thumb rule number 1 is that 30% of our monthly earnings must be saved. And where it should be invested? It should be invested for investments also. There are some thumb rules which over the centuries, people are following it. The first thumb rule is that there are 4 options where we can invest our savings. These are debt, equity, gold, and real estate. So I'm sure all the students of finance, they know already about it. Debt, equity, gold, and real estate. These are the 4 options where we can invest our savings. That 30% savings minimum which we are making from our monthly earnings. Now, how much to invest in debt, how much in equity, how much in gold? The thumb rule for that is 100 minus your age should be invested in equity, which means if you are 30 years of age, then 70% of your savings must go into equity. But if you have advanced in age, if you are 50 years, then only 50%. If you are 70 years, then 30%. And even if your grandpa is 80 years today, even he should be investing 20% of his total savings or accumulated funds into equity, because he can also hope to live up to 100, 105. So 100 minus your age should be invested in equity. 10% should be invested in gold or commodities. So 10% gold is something which is evergreen, has been there in our society for a few hundred years, whereas the stock markets and all have come in only last 100 years. But gold has always been there as yellow metal, and people love it. It protects us, from inflation also. But here, not more than 10% should be invested, and also less than 10% also. So 100 minus your age in equity, 10% in gold, balance in debt. That would include, your bank fixed deposits, public provident fund, corporate debentures, bonds, etc., and savings account, etc. So this is how you should divide your portfolio of 100 rupees into debt, equity, and gold. And if somebody's overall financial portfolio is in excess of 5 crores of rupees in Indian terms, which is $700,000 US, if you want to know it in dollars, then only one should consider investing in real estate, because real estate is not everybody's cup of tea as far as India is concerned. To begin with, also you need 10, 20, 30, 50 lakhs of rupees. So these are some of the thumb rules. And the other thumb rules, as important part of financial planning, are that we all must have a health insurance plan, and particularly during the COVID times, we have learned and read in media that how people are suffering because huge amounts of bills are being raised for medical treatment, etc. So minimum 5 lakhs of rupees for a young couple and 10 lakhs of rupees for family where the dependent parents are also living with the young couple. Again, these are the bare minimum requirement as part of financial planning principles. 5 lakhs for young couple, 10 lakhs for family floater. And then when it comes to life insurance as protection, which is another pillar of financial planning, one must have a coverage of 7 to 10 times of the annual earnings. So if somebody's annual earnings are say 10 lakhs of rupees, then he must have a life insurance of 1 crore. If somebody's annual earnings are 50 lakhs of rupees, he must have a life insurance cover of 4 to 5 crores, which is 7 to 10 times of your annual earnings must be the life insurance cover or a term insurance plan. And apart from that, as part of the financial planning principles and wealth creation strategies, we all must consider to have a NPS, which is the new pension system or the national pension system, which was announced by PFRDA a few years ago. And it's available to every Indian. Every Indian means even those who are say shopkeepers, businessmen, self-employed, and even those who are employed with MNCs, with government, with local companies, with private sector companies. So every Indian citizen is entitled to open an NPS account where he not only saves tax while he is contributing, but also he gets lump sum amount when he retires at the age of 60 or 65, and then thereafter he gets a fixed amount as pension lifelong. Whether he lives up to 85 years or 90 or 110 years, he gets a monthly pension fixed amount for rest of his life. So NPS as part of retirement planning is again very, very important, integral part of a person's financial plan. So financial plan would include 30% savings invested into 100 minus your age into equity, 10% in gold, balance in debt, 5 lakhs minimum health insurance for couple, 10 lakhs for couple with parents, and life insurance coverage 7 to 10 times of your annual salary, and NPS account investment so that you take care of your pension and retirement planning. So this is in a nutshell, in a small capsule, that how we should look at the various financial goals that most of us have. So I think we are getting close to the end of the session now.
So would you like to answer any question, or do we?
Sure, why not? Why not? If the questions are shared, and if the questions are they should not be very specific to one person. If it is like that, then we would like to connect with that person. Or if the questions are of generic use and are relevant to the topic that we are discussing, we would love to look at them and give our views.
Okay, so because 2-3 questions were asked by many people, so we'll go ahead with those.
Yeah.
So credit rating agencies have failed in multiple ways in the past, and even after its numerous setbacks, people still tend to rely on them, right? So is there any way in which these credit rating agencies can be regulated in a better manner, or is this problem something that's just inevitable?
Right. So yes, very, very pertinent question, and many of our investors in our country are suffering in the hands of some of these decisions which they take basis the ratings given by the credit rating agencies. So there is a big question mark on the credibility of the 3 or 4 or 5 credit rating agencies which we have accredited in our country. I'm sure all of you know that credit rating agencies are also regulated by Ministry of Finance through SEBI, but there have been some lapses because we have seen the credit ratings falling from AAA to straight away to default, in very short span of time, which is generally not possible. The way it functions is that it must come from AAA to AA plus, then to AA, then to AA minus, then A plus, then A, then A minus. But we have seen several instances where the credit ratings have been, reduced straight away from AAA to B or to even sometimes default category. That essentially points out to the gap in the functioning abilities of the credit rating agencies and the way they have been, performing their duties. So what is it now for the investors? They should not blindly rely only on the credit ratings given by the credit rating agencies. They also must look at the other factors. We always say that once you are choosing an investment, as part of your portfolio, you're putting your hard-earned money there, then you need to look at 4 or 5 different factors minimum. Credit rating being just one of them. Credit rating should not be the sole factor on which to rely. The other factor should be the track record of the company, the entire sector, in which you are investing, and also the future outlook, the future prospects of that particular sector. They are more important. That is why, as part of financial planning, we say that the 3 important factors which would actually ensure that you make good returns are asset allocation, and asset allocation, which means that you must divide your money between debt, equity, and gold. So that is one part. The second is to take care of credit rating is diversification, which means that never ever invest more than 10% of your total portfolio in one single scrip or in one single company. So without taking names, we know that certain companies have defaulted, on their bonds or on their debt obligations, but those clients have suffered more who had invested 50% of their money into only that one company, thinking because that company enjoys a AAA rating or a AA+ rating, etc., not ignoring the need to diversify to not more than 10% in one company, so that even if one company falters or delays, their overall financial position should not get a huge setback. So yes, very pertinent question. Credit rating agencies working is under scrutiny, and the regulations need to be tightened more. And if there are any lapses found, then of course they need to be plugged out.
Thank you. So one more question. The pandemic and the lockdown has resulted in a cash crunch among the businessmen, and they will be looking for fundings to resume operations. On the other hand, investors are very pessimistic about the future, and they'll be unwilling to block in huge amounts of funds in any business. So what are the kinds of steps that can be taken to make these two ends meet?
Right. So yes, so again, this is something which would differ from industry to industry, from sector to sector, because not all sectors are, impacted in the same way. So for example, all of us know that the pharmaceutical industry, to which all eyes are waiting, for any respite from this pandemic, they are all doing well. They are stepping up, their research, and a lot of drugs are being consumed, which people feel that can give them some relief. And also, all these masks and surgical instruments and ventilators, all these, things have actually been much in demand. Similarly, when it comes to tech industry, the IT industry, because now all of us are working from home, and there is a greater usage of, technology, of laptops, of iPads, of so many applications which have come up only in last 2-3 months. And that is why we see that they are super busy in executing, their plans, etc. But on the other hand, hospitality industry, airline industry, we know that it will take long time for them to recover, from the setbacks that they have had. But the FMCG are still continuing to do well because people are still consuming, whether it is toothpaste or whether it is soaps or whether it is the normal food stuff that they eat. So it again depends from industry to industry, from sector to sector, and all sectors are not impacted in the same manner. So while taking decisions, we need to keep in mind the specific nuances of each sector. And when it comes to investors, you should not be, again, I'm going back to the topic which I covered in some detail in the beginning, which is fear and greed. So we should not feel, that fearful or greedy. Greedy in the sense that, okay, now markets have fallen, so let us invest, a lot of amount so that we will make, huge profit when the markets recover. You should always link your investments to your own time horizon and to your own goal. And if you want to invest in equity, in businesses, or in equity markets, then you must have a time horizon of minimum 7 years. If your time horizon is less than 7 years, please stay away from equity market, even though the markets may have fallen due to this pandemic. And if you have more than 7 years, then obviously these are the best times to fund the companies, to give them the money, or to buy their stocks, or to invest in the mutual fund schemes for your long-term goals like your own children education or your retirement planning, etc. So always follow the principles of financial planning and do not look for tactical things that, okay, now markets have fallen, let me quickly buy this share, that share, or Now, when it comes to companies, those who are getting impacted, obviously they have to redraw their business plans. They have to ensure, that their bare minimum working continues. They continue to pay, their employees, their key employees enough salary so that their business does not collapse, etc. So for each industry, it is a different challenge, and they have to accordingly. If it is a new company, unfunded, then they are finding it difficult. But old companies with a lot of reserves, cash reserves, etc., can actually pull along very well for 3 to 6 months, and then come out of this situation, and then start their growth journey once again. So it will depend from sector to sector, from industry to industry.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. And we're really sorry for the chat option not being available to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So as the session draws to an end, on behalf of the Finance and Investment Cell of SRCC, I would like to thank you and extend my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Anuj Chopra, who took out the time and from his schedule and shared his insights with us. I would also like to thank Ms. Saroj Joshi for all her support, the professors of SRCC, and all in attendance for today's session. Thank you so much for making this such a success. And I would like to invite Ms. Saroj Joshi to for the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Anil sir. It was such a wonderful and a knowledgeable session. And I think it has benefited all of us in some or the other way. One important takeaway which I'm going to take is definitely ignore the emotional thing when you are investing, because I think this is a one thing which actually doesn't help me to earn more returns in the market, because when it goes up, I feel it will go even further up. When it goes down, I will go further down. So I think one thing which I'm going to learn today is I'll try to stop my emotions come in between my investment decisions. Thank you so much for such a wonderful session and for sharing your thumb rules for investing. It was really a wonderful session. Thank you. I would also like to thank my FIC team for organizing the session and all the participants for attending the session and being with us. Thank you, sir. And maybe in some other future time period, we would like to have you again with us to take up the other topics.
Definitely, and with chat option.
Yeah, definitely, sir. Actually, chat option can be enabled before we start the meeting. So after the meeting, it was not possible.
Okay, no, that I'm sure students would have loved it much more had they interacted with it. Then, but
definitely,
obviously,
sir.
there's always a next time.
Yeah, definitely. Next time we'll have the chat option enabled, or maybe we can have a personal interaction. We could invite you in the college itself.
Would love to.
Thank you, sir.